Well, this is directly connected in a way to last week's message. It was an exhortation from James to express that our faith, if it is true faith, will lead to appropriate action. His point was, you say you have faith with your words, but you don't have deeds to back them up, then your faith is dead. So our faith is proved not alone by our words, but by our actions. So, given that kind of a message, you might wrongly conclude that, well, our words really don't matter that much then, do they? It's all just about what we do, not what we say. Well, not so fast, my friend. James is actually going to correct the opposite error, the error that thinking that our words don't matter. It's going to add a lot of gravity to the things that we say. This morning, we're going to learn that our words are incredibly important and powerful, and they have immense power to do good or to harm. And they have power to lead others and ourselves into greater sense of safety or greater peril. Our words, in short, matter. In the 1839 British play written by old Edward Bulwer named Richelieu. Everybody say Richelieu. The cardinal in the play named Richelieu, after the play is written, is a French statesman, and he says this. He says, beneath the rule of men entirely great, the pen is mightier than the sword. His point is plain to see. Behind words are ideas and persuasion. And those ideas and persuasion, when they have taken root, have the power to move people far beyond what a threat of violence can do. Ergo, the pen is mightier than the sword. Words can inspire, words can motivate, words can enliven. Consider the example of the late Martin Luther King Jr. and his I Have a Dream speech. With his careful words, he inspired a nation to a renewed sense of vigor and hope for a brighter and more just tomorrow. More than the threat of violence, his words moved people. And before Edward Bulwer was the Greek playwright Euripides, who wrote almost identical words. The tongue is mightier than the blade. And before those words were the words of the wise Solomon, who wrote in Proverbs 12, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. And before him, yet, was the lesson that we learned in Genesis 3 in the Garden of Eden, how the words of the serpent led Adam and Eve into ruin and the desolation that's fallen from that. It needs no explanation. From the ancient wisdom to modern history, we see a clear truth over and over again, that our words, they matter. At the outset, I hope that you can already get to sense a deeper gravity about words, that before we even open our mouths to utter a word, a single word, we should consider even prayerfully, as Bartholomew exhorted us this morning, to consider the power of our words. And so James has already exhorted us in chapter 1 twice to this. Phil noted the first, which is that everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak. And again, later in chapter 1 and verse 26, he said, those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves. Self-deception. And their religion is worthless. If you don't keep a tight rein on your tongue, you are deceiving yourself if you believe you are religious, and your religion is worthless. Wow. Again, James. This is not a trivial matter this morning. It's not just like a little bit of an enhancement to your religious life, a little bit of holiness here and there. No, this is serious matters. So let's get into it. Chapter 3, verse 1, it starts off with this exhortation. It says, "Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly." Well, teachers were respected and honored in Jewish culture. In Jewish culture, the teacher was like unto one of us aspiring to be a doctor or a firefighter or a policeman. It was somebody with a highly respected position, a school teacher. Think of that. Teachers in that society were those who really tried to help people, and so they were loved because they helped people and dedicated their lives to guiding people towards the Lord. And what an honorable thing to do. And why would James want to discourage anybody from that honorable pursuit? And he says, not many of you should become teachers. Why? Because unless a teacher has a very tight rein on their tongue, the potential of doing harm is too huge. Think about the nature of what a teacher is, what it is that they do, what is the tool of their trade. If you had a brick mason in here, they may hold up their trowel, right? The tool of their trade. Or a mechanic, they have their wrenches and their floor jacks. How about a software engineer? Don't they have their computer? What is the teacher's tool of the trade? Is it not their mind and their mouths? A teacher uses more words than any because the nature of their profession and because of their authority. As teachers, their words tend to carry more weight when they speak of matters. When a doctor will tell you about your personal health and give you a health regimen, we listen carefully to that because that's his profession. And so when a pastor or a teacher speaks on matters of faith, people pay attention. So James would say, not many of you should take up that role because the nature of that position and that authority will put you in peril. Since words are the tools of the teacher's trade, it can be risky, it can be dangerous, for there's an inherent danger unless that teacher is extremely careful with what they say. It gives them, as a teacher, a worrisome measure of power. If they're not careful, they could lead not just themselves, but others into danger. A danger like error or teaching with or without malicious intent. The best of intentions, a teacher could lead somebody into sin or worse. And so the danger is serious that it's actually repeated 3 times in the Gospels where Jesus warns in Matthew, Mark, and Luke that it would be better for him, that is, that teacher, if a millstone were hung around his neck and were cast into the sea, then he should cause one little one to stumble. Like, that is serious, and that is a stern warning. So that's the danger, and it's an obvious one, that a teacher will be judged more strictly because when teaching error, they are leading others into actions which might even put their very souls into peril. So not many of us should be teachers. We have to take care with our words. Verse 2 adds this, though, that nobody's perfect, especially in what they say. Take a look at verse 2. It says, we all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. So everybody falls short in many ways, but especially in what we say. That should actually just be a moment in which we can pause and just think about that. Whatever we have to say today, it will first apply to ourselves. That's what James is saying. James isn't saying that, okay, this whole sermon you can be thinking about your neighbor or your friend or somebody across the road who offended you. He's saying that we all stumble in what we say. And so the application should immediately land at home. I've got work to do. You've got work to do. That's the beginning. That's the starting point. All of you who have got elbows for your spouse, you can just take a deep breath and take it in yourself. And so we must strive to keep our tongues in check. What James does next is paint the picture of what he's going through here. He's going to use several lively illustrations in sort of rapid succession. They're supposed to just make natural sense to you. I'm sure that they do. But it's just revealing how challenging of a task he's really calling us to. How hard it is to rein in the tongue. It's going to seem impossibly hard. Take a look at verse 3. It says, when we put bits into the mouths of horses and make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Anyone into horses? Like any equestrians? Okay, we've got a few nods. Cool. I'm happy for you. You put your bits into the horse's mouth and you can steer with the reins any direction. Left, right, slow down, or speed up, Tonto. You can steer the whole body. You want to go left or right? Fine. Here's another analogy to kind of illustrate the same point. Or take ships, for example, verse 4. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds and are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Imagine the biggest boat you can think of, a cruise ship. Well, we just watched Pirates of the Caribbean, so we're thinking of the Black Pearl. Big ship, tiny rudder. Wherever the captain wants to go, all he has to do is turn that rudder a direction, and that whole big boat will move. Now imagine how a big boat can be steered by such a small part. Now he drives home the point. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the human body. All of our tongues are tiny parts of our body, you guys. But it makes great boasts, and he adds in verse 6, it corrupts the whole body and sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and itself is set on fire by hell. His point is like a horse or like a boat, the tongue, though it's a very, very small part of your body, it is a directional part of your body. It sets the course of your life. If our mouths are filled with lies, filth, or gossip, then our bodies sort of follow. If our tongues are careful, if they're loving, if they're kind, if they're generous, then our bodies follow. The tongue is the steering wheel of the body, according to James. Where your tongue leads, your body will follow. If your tongue is good, of course, your body will be driven towards good. But if your mouth is evil, then your whole body will be driven toward evil. He uses this great zoo analogy. It's tough, taming the tongue. He's saying that it's so tough that we can tame all sorts of zoo creatures and creatures at SeaWorld, but taming the tongue, it seems impossible. In verse 7, it says, all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind. No, we went to the zoo this year, and I think last year we went to SeaWorld. At the zoo, they trained a falcon to fly over our admiring heads, swooping down swiftly to get some of the meat that the trainer had. And we were amazed. We got to see a vulture with its impressive wingspan hop across the stage, showing us as it went along. SeaWorld, we got to watch orcas doing front flips and otters impressively acting out to the narration of a storyteller. Training all these creatures is all just simply child's play, according to James, in comparison to a person being able to actually tame their tongue. In the world, we've trained elephants to paint. We've actually trained dogs to detect dangerous substances like drugs or even explosives. We've mastered nature in so many ways, but we're not able to yet master our own tongue. Isn't that a remarkable thing? He says it in verse 8. He says, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. Think of it. You can subdue lions and command birds of prey, but we cannot control the words that are coming out of our mouth. The human tongue is like the mouth of a rattlesnake, he's saying. Watch out, filled with poison, deadly weapon. What a powerful image. The mouth quick to strike, filled with venom. What a desperate image, actually. We all know the truth of this. How many of us have been bitten by the poisonous words of others and have left us bruised? Maybe for years, maybe forever. How many of us have felt the sting of lies that has been spoken of us or gossiped about us, or unexplainably been the recipient of hateful words with seeming no reason? How many of us would admit that we've been on the other side of that? We have said words, done things in anger or haste that have poisoned a relationship, maybe for weeks, months, or maybe years. Or maybe we're still living in the wake of some of those words. It's not just what others have done to us, it's the fact of what James is saying is the things that we've done to others that we have to consider. It's been James' point all along, actually. Do our words, are they building up or are they tearing down? Do we constantly speak about what we hate? I hate this, I hate that, I hate this person, I hate that, I hate my job, I hate my life. Is that not poison in our mouths? James makes it clear that if we don't control our words carefully, then our words set the course for us. They will control us. It will set our life's course. The tongue is the steering wheel of the body. Do we think that James wants us to take our words seriously, to think before we speak? Do you think he wants us to do that? I think, yeah, we can say, yeah. Yeah, we get it, James. Uncle James, you got it. We're tapping out. You got us. We get it. Our tongues, they need this total transformation. This message is really primarily about two things. And what we've learned is two parallels with the tongue. Beginning with the call to not many be teachers, and also the examples provided by James. It's a call to not lead others into sin by the things that we say and do, poisoning relationships, poisoning people's faith by misteaching, but also to not lead ourselves, our own bodies, into sin by the things that we say. There's another layer of this I don't have a lot of time to go into, but there's also a way in which we can affect our relationship with the Lord through the things that we say. But now we get to the hard part. The hard part is not learning what's gone wrong. We can all acknowledge that. That happened really quick. We figured it out really early on, I think, today. And probably before you've already known this. You figured out that there's something wrong. But how do we make it right? How do we move from the tongue is this restless evil and no one can tame it, to something more hopeful? James is going to let us know what exactly it's going to require. And it's no surprise it's an act of God's Spirit. Is there any hope in conclusion? Or is James 3:8, is that a death sentence? No one can tame the tongue. If we can't tame it, as James is saying, then why do we even bother trying? Why would he even write about it? Why would he put it in the gospel? Just to inform us that we're all just suffering from this wickedness within our mouths and we can't do anything about it? No, there is hope, actually. There is hope, actually. And it's no surprise that the hope comes directly from God himself. James is right. No mere human can tame our tongue. But the good news is that God is not a mere human. God has actually already promised something to renovate us completely, inside and out. And that includes our tongues. It's not just about a hope for the future. Like, yeah, one day God's going to take care of all of this. But, one day it's going to be over the rainbow kind of thing. It will be better there. It's actually a present reality. It isn't like what some people will casually say, one day I would like to travel to France, and one day I will, I assure you. Or one day we're going to put in that pool that we've always wanted in our backyard. We will one day. No, if it's a trip to France, okay, God's already bought the tickets. And in fact, we're already checked in to our flight, and we're on our way to the airport with our bags packed, if that's what it is. If it's a pool that we're putting in, then the ground has already been broken and the rebar has already been put in. In fact, they're currently pouring it. And shortly they'll be filling it with water and putting in the diving board. No, the transformation of our tongues has already begun. The renovation has begun within us, and it's not just a future reality which we will one day see all at once. It's something that's taking place slowly over time that has already begun. We're living into that new reality, and that's the call of James. As we start speaking differently, we do so not because we have arrived, but because we are arriving. But because God is already at work within us to do that. The reality is that God's work causes us and gives us hope, causes us to engage with hope in the process, knowing that he's already beginning the transformation. And so let me close with a story that I hope illustrates this, the nature of this hope. And I once knew a man, true story. I'll call him Smith. He's a church man. He's not a part of this body. Don't worry, none of you. Okay. He's a part of a previous church body that I was a leader in. And Smith, we'll just say that Smith was like a guy that each of us knows. He's the human wrecking ball. He's the guy which everybody walks around on eggshells, not really trying to communicate with this person because they never know what's going to set them off. That kind of a guy. There were moments with Smith is when he's in a good mood, you can see it, and he's really pleasant to be around, even funny. But without warning, if you said the wrong thing or maybe he didn't do the right thing, like that, he would lash out and cut you down with his words. And it would feel like, wow, where did that come from? Because Smith was this way, he had nobody in his life. I mean, his friends, whoever they were before, they were gone. He was married, but he ended up getting a divorce. Even his family member really didn't want to associate with him or invite him to normal family events. His tongue was like a fire. It burned every bridge before he could even rebuild them. But one day Smith, and again, he was involved in church, and so I think that the Lord was certainly at work with him. He began to engage and ask God to transform his tongue, his mouth. And it wasn't just his effort, it was something that God was already at work doing within him. And he became a person who considered more carefully his words. He began to speak with kindness, he began to be more patient, spoke the truth. He held back the things that he wanted to say, his visceral reactions to things and people, and he simply would take them in and calm down and consider carefully what he said. Surprisingly enough, and again, this is somebody I actively knew, that this person did end up building a lot more friendships, did end up actually meeting another woman and remarrying. And all of this happened because God's work within him to transform the inner person, the tongue, the steering wheel of his body. Smith, he didn't fix himself. He was submitting to the process in which God was already at work doing. And I think that's our hope too today. It's not that we have arrived or that we'll say, we'll speak perfectly in the future, but that God is at work building within us this greater holiness. And he invites us into that process. Will we submit to it? We can. And he calls us to. And this is the hope that the work has already begun. So let's live into it because it's too important. The tongue is too powerful. Let's speak love and life as God calls us to. Let's be who Jesus calls us to be. Let's pray.